everyone. Welcome to the IIBA podcast series. My name is Amy Riddell, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Business Analyst Times. And I'm so pleased to introduce today our guest, Kevin Brennan. Kevin's going to be talking about the business analysis career path. But before we get to that, let me tell you a little bit about him. Kevin is an executive and business analysis consultant who helps companies create new business models, develop new products and services, and improve their business processes. After 2 decades of leadership in the BA profession, he knows how to define and execute clear strategies that deliver important changes with limited resources, and that an idea is only as good as your team's ability to understand and execute on it. Kevin played a leading role in the launch of the IIBA and the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. He's led the creation and development of the Guide to Business Analysis Body of Knowledge and has taught business analysis, process improvement, and new product development on every continent, except Antarctica. So I'd like to welcome Kevin. Kevin, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Amy. It's good to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. So let's get started. The BA career path has undergone quite a bit of change since IIBA was launched. Would you share with us some of your insight on the BA career path and the changes you've witnessed since then?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. So back when we started IIBA, there really wasn't something that you could call a BA career path. In fact, there wasn't really a clear understanding of what a business analyst was or what we did. In fact, one of the reasons why a lot of companies in the Toronto area wanted IIBA to exist was exactly that. They were looking to hire business analysts, and when they went out and they couldn't find anybody with the skill sets they needed because nobody agreed on what those skill sets were. So the big change that we've seen since IIBA was founded, I think, is that the role has become much more standardized. There's a much broader and common understanding out there, and I'd say now worldwide, about what a business analyst is and what a BA does. Since there's also been some other major changes that I think we'll need to talk about. One is, of course, the rise of Agile and the effect that has had on how we develop software applications and how we approach business in general. A lot of the traditional methods that BAs use are not really used in Agile, and so we've had to develop a new approach to business analysis, the Agile business analysis work that's done now, and we've also seen, I think, more senior roles come into the picture, such as business architects and business relationship management, that I think are a natural part of the career path for business analysts.
So what do you think are driving these changes?
Well, in the case of Agile, of course, it's the emergence of Agile as, I think these days, one of the more common ways in which software is built, if not the most common. We've gone from a world where a lot of projects were built in a waterfall or iterative fashion, and that meant that we would develop extensive requirements documentation that would be used by developers to work on a system for months at a time. Now, Agile methods work in iterations of a month or less. And that means that we have to produce the analysis work much faster. We have to be much more focused on what we do. And we have to use different techniques to match up with the way the Agile work itself is done. The other big thing I think has changed things is there's been an ongoing need for architecture, particularly in really large corporations, where you have a lot of moving pieces, you have a lot of different people working in the organization in different silos, and there needs to be some way of ensuring that what they do is aligned with the business strategy. And because enterprise architecture has often focused on IT, we've seen the new role of business architect and business relationship manager rise up to fill that gap, to help the business coordinate its needs at a strategic level with what with what the IT department is doing.
Okay, so a lot of changes since the beginning. Yeah. Tell us what you think the career path in business analysis looks like today.
Well, I think, back 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, but for most BAs, the career path was pretty much to move on to project management, right? Um, I think that's what we're seeing change. Right now, the career path is a lot more complicated. You really have a whole bunch of different dimensions in which BAs might work or might focus. So one option is to move into the product management space. And I think that's actually a fairly compelling option for BAs who are interested in, a more strategic role and working with the market, right? And so that starts off perhaps as an agile product owner, but means moving up into understanding more about marketing and market analysis and customer needs analysis, customer journeys, user experience, and really finding a way to create products that are, you know, something that customers are actually want to use and will use. And that's becoming a big demand in business because with mobile applications and other technology, people really expect to be able to control a lot more of their interactions with a company directly rather than having to call in and, go through a customer service rep. So on that front, beyond the product manager, there's the opportunity to rise up into higher levels of senior management, as a director or VP of product management. I'm also seeing a growing demand for process improvement people. So that means typically expertise in Lean or Six Sigma as a skill you need to develop. But there, you have the opportunity to go out and look at, the value streams of a company, how they develop, how they do work, what kind of work they do, and look for ways to improve it. A lot of my time is actually spent doing that kind of work these days. So in the third, there's still the traditional BA space in the capability area, right? And I think there, the career path looks more like moving up towards that business architecture or business relationship manager role. So moving from, focusing on individual systems or individual projects up to, taking ownership of a system and a relationship with people who use it, to looking at the entire business model across, multiple lines of business or areas and coordinating the activity that goes on between them. And I think fourth, there's the opportunity to move into the data space. So there we have the growth of business analytics, of a lot of digital technology and digital transformation, the use of AI and machine learning and other tools that are likely to really reshape how business is done over the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay, so the job titles related to business analysis can be extremely wide and varied. What opportunities and challenges do you think this provides to BA professionals as they continue down their own path?
Yeah, and I think one of the big challenges there is that these things are all seen as really distinct roles, even though they all rely on a core set of skills that everybody has. So what's similar about them is that no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing, product, process, capability, or data, you're still building models that reflect, the reality of the business you work in, right? You're still having to work with stakeholders to reach agreement on those models, to determine how to move them forward, to build a future state of those models. So there's still all that core, strategic thinking skill, business acumen, those soft facilitation skills. These are all really transferable among any of these roles. But in practice, what happens is that people are seen as product managers or, process people or business architects or business analysts. And it's very difficult for companies to see the opportunity to move somebody from one role to another. So I think that is really the biggest problem that business analysis professionals face, is that use of their transferable skills to move into new roles. And I think as we see companies transform significantly in the next decade, by adopting new technologies, that's going to become a major crisis or a major issue for a lot of people, because they will have the skills to succeed in new roles, but they may not get recognized as having the skills that they need. So I really think it's important for employers to recognize that, when they're looking to add to their product management skill set or whatever, they already have people in-house and a large group of people who have 80% of what they're looking for, right? But instead of going to somebody who entirely new, who may not have that background, train them up, they should be looking to leverage their existing staff. So if you're a BA who is trying to move into one of these roles, I think what you need to do is to emphasize, those skills that you're already bringing to the table. If you're looking to move into product management, for instance, you can show that you already know how to write requirements. You already know how to work with diverse stakeholders, right? You already know how to facilitate discussions. If you've worked on an agile team, you already know how to break those things down to user stories, how to work closely with developers. It is, in the end, a very small set of additional skills that you need to acquire. And I think it's also incumbent on us to learn how to demonstrate that to potential employers and show them that we have the background they need for these roles they're trying to fill. Good news is that there is a lot of demand for these new kind of roles, and there's a big opportunity for people who are prepared to learn the new skills necessary to get that additional 20% that they need to be effective in that role.
Okay, so we touched on change in technology very briefly, because as we all know, the world around us is accelerating and changing at a very rapid pace, sometimes too rapid. But we want to know what you think this means to the BA career path moving forward.
Well, I think one of the big changes we're already seeing is there's a decreasing emphasis on the old school BA work of developing requirements for in-house built software. In a lot of cases, people are either going out to, purchase the off-the-shelf software, or, looking for other ways to cut down on those costs by potentially taking applications that they can then bring in-house, as opposed to building them up from scratch. Now, that will never, well, I won't say never. It won't go away for quite a while. And one of the things that people who see, what the future looks like often get overexcited about is thinking that, all the old technology is suddenly going to go away. It won't. There are still huge companies that run basically on COBOL, right, on technology that is older, well, not older than I am, but, predates my entry into the workforce at least. Those kind of roles will continue to exist, but they're going to become fewer. So if you're starting up a new company today, you're probably going to run off, purchase software for a lot of stuff. What you do custom develop, you're going to run on cloud technologies or maybe even serverless applications. And so we're going to have to move away as business analysts from thinking primarily about software requirements for in-house systems. We might be looking at them for customer-facing systems. We'll be looking at customizing existing or commercial off-the-shelf systems much more than we will building our own. Another big thing that we should be looking at as BAs is the process improvement space. One thing that I found when I worked, in the trenches full-time as a BA is that we spent a lot of time working around poorly designed processes instead of doing what we should do, which is to clean up the process and then implement the system based on that. I think in practice, people need to be becoming more of a generalist in their point of view, that projects aren't going to be about just improving processes or just building new systems or improving the products we put out there. That in fact, these things cover all of these things. They cover data, capability, process, and product. And so it's good to be able to be flexible about where you are in each of those areas. I guess the other big thing that's going to affect us is probably, digital transformation, which is the buzzword of the moment. And like most of those buzzwords, it's safe to say that you'll probably see less change the next year or two than you hear hyped up. But in the 10 to 15-year time frame, you might see more than you expect. One of the things that I hear a lot from business analysts is, are these new technologies going to remove the need for BAs? And I don't think so. I'd actually say that project managers have a lot more to be worried about than we do. And that's because as long as there are, stakeholders, as long as there are competing interests, as long as there are different points of view, you're still going to need somebody with the skills to come into an organization and bring everybody together and help them work out what the right thing is to do. Your tools will change. They may change dramatically, right? We may find, for instance, that a lot of process improvement because of something that can be done programmatically, that we can get computers to, track how processes are done, to take that data, mine it, and then figure out a way to transform and streamline those processes with less human intervention. But there's still always going to be the need to work through what stakeholders want and, more importantly, bring them into alignment about what they need. Because without that, we'll find that, business transformation efforts are no more effective in 10 or 15 years when companies are fully digital than they are today.
Okay. All right, I'm going to hit you with a three-parter now, Kevin.
Okay.
Okay. Are you seeing changes in the skills that a BA must have to successfully help organizations or drive transformation, especially in the digital world? And to break that down even more, are the expectations that organizations have for BA professionals changing? And how are these skills different from the skills of the past?
Okay, so that is a trifecta. And Amy, please remind me if I forget part of it during the process of answering.
Okay, I'm on it.
Okay. All right. So I think one of the biggest changes I've seen, and this is something that has been happening over the last decade or so as well, is there's less emphasis on the technical skills of specifying and writing requirements, and more on the soft skills of facilitation and driving collaboration and bringing people together, right? I think I'm also, interestingly enough, at least in Toronto, what I've seen is that companies tend to be getting more and more specific when they're looking for BA skills. So they kind of assume that everybody has the core basic skills, and now they have a tendency to look for specific experience working with whatever technology they're adopting. The problem with that is, that you start to see ads, as always happens in recruiting, looking for somebody with 5 years of business analysis experience with AI, and good luck finding that person. There's probably about 3 of them, So I do think that in that respect, we are going to have to see a greater degree of flexibility on the part of BAs. I think the key thing is to be continuing to learn on a regular basis, to, read about these new technologies, understand what they can do, find frameworks that help you figure out how to use them in a business analysis context. And Amy, I'm going to stop here for a moment because I think I need you to remind me of the parts of the question that I have forgotten to answer so far.
No, you're actually doing an exceptional job covering most of it. I guess what you were saying, that there's, sort of a shift away from the technical skills more and focusing more on the soft skills. Is that something that organizations are expecting from BAs now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I'm definitely hearing a lot of organizational demand for BAs to take on a bigger leadership role and a bigger role in driving the outcomes that they're looking to see, rather than, just sitting there and being an order taker who makes notes about what the various stakeholders want. The thing is that if all the stakeholders are kind of in agreement about what needs to be done and it's clearly understood, you really don't need a business analyst. You could just sit down and you can tell the developers, I want this, the developers can build it. Or more often these days, somebody goes out and finds a piece of software that does that and they buy it. Where you need a business analyst is for complicated problems where it's not obvious from the start what the right answer is or what needs to be done. There's problems where there's a lot of moving pieces, where there's a lot of different factors, and you need to take that information, you need to bring the stakeholders together, you need to kind of model what's going on with them and bring them to a point where they have broad agreement on what needs to happen. One thing I can tell you from practicing business analysis, especially at strategic level, is that one of the key skills that you have to develop as a business analyst is that bringing people together. And in fact, the process needs to be there because the process of working through all of this stuff, as a group is how people come to agreement. So you can present them with the ideal solution right off the bat, and they still won't go for it because they haven't been involved in making that decision. So that's why I think soft skills are becoming more in demand, because the soft skills are actually what drives success that we then capture in a set of requirements.
Can I just ask you something sort of that relates back to that? One of the key skills is bringing people together. So if I was a business analyst, which skills specifically would I want to hone to be able to perform that job as well as I can?
Well, I'd say you'd want to look at facilitation skills and potentially some coaching skills, but definitely facilitation, right? And the thing about facilitation specifically is that you need to learn how to read a room. One of the big things that can happen in a session is that you get your stakeholders in the room, and somebody comes along and, there's this phrase about how decisions get made, and they talk about how they're made by the hippo. And the hippo stands for the highest paid person's opinion, right? And in a lot of companies, that's what will happen. The person who is considered most senior in the room says, we're going to do it this way, and everybody agrees to that. But the reality is that they haven't really agreed to that. They don't want to do that. And so that's where you get resistance, and you get change issues, and you get change management problems. So a key skill for a facilitator is to identify and spot from people's body language when they have something to say and they're not saying it, right? And to make sure that those issues get out on the table in a way where they can be discussed and worked through. Because sometimes the person who is least willing or able to make the case that something is wrong because, they're shy or they feel too junior to make that comment, or they're reluctant for whatever other reason. They've been yelled at by, a rough boss in the past. But they may have the insight necessary to stop you from making a huge mistake. And so you want to get that stuff out there where you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've touched on some of these things before, but as we're getting close to wrapping, maybe we can just go over it one more time. What career trends are you seeing out there for the business analysis career?
Well, right now we're seeing demand for business analysts growing, and I think that has that will continue to increase, especially as, and this is probably the controversial part, I think we're going to see a huge transition in project management and what project management is in the next decade or so. And I don't see this being talked about in the project management space. If you look at AI and what AI does, AI is really, really good at a particular kind of thing, and that's in automating things based on predicting how people will behave and what they will do. And talking to AI people and, some of the companies working in the project management tool space, it's very clear that they expect AI to be able to automate a lot of traditional project management. The development of schedules, the monitoring of schedules, that kind of work is all going to be in the tools within the next decade or so. And the collaboration tools that are coming out are going to be able to do things like tracking status and updating status and building status reports without a lot of human intervention. So I can't give you a date for when this will happen. It'll probably happen over time. But that means that the role that's left, the work that's left, is going to be around this, strategic alignment and facilitation and, bringing people together in a single direction. And that is work that BAs are very well equipped to do. So I think BAs should expect to be and preparing to be moving into a much more of a leadership role and taking on some of those leadership responsibilities, because I think that will become a major part of the role. We won't be able to offload that to somebody else, or, we won't be in a position where we expect somebody else to do that kind of thing.
Okay. This is our final question. Are you ready?
Yep.
For all the BA professionals who are listening to this podcast, and I know many, many, many will be, what advice would you give them to prepare for the opportunities of tomorrow?
Well, Amy, I've been asked that question a lot over the years, and it's always the same advice. So I'll stick with that now. I think there are two major things that you ought to do if you're listening to this in terms of your career. And this applies to everyone, and it applies always. The first is never get too comfortable. Your job should be hard. And I don't mean hard in the sense of insane levels of work being handed off to you or difficult bosses or unpleasant coworkers. I mean hard in the sense that you should always have this little part of your brain that's saying, am I sure I can really do this? Because if you are in a position where you are 100% sure you know everything that needs to happen, right, that you know exactly what needs to be done every step of the way, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're not pushing yourself. And eventually, if that niche you've found starts to go away, you have nowhere to go. So always be trying to move on to new projects where you're going to learn something. If you have a new opportunity, a new job, whatever, ask yourself, what can you learn in this role that you aren't doing today? And that connects to the next point, which is make sure you keep learning. We know that there's a whole bunch of technologies coming along that are going to change the way companies work. Find out about them. You don't have to become an AI programmer, but understand what AI can do. Understand what machine learning can do. Understand, the technology implications of the web, and think about what do I need to learn in order to deal with that stuff, to use that stuff to work on projects that are going to be using those new tools. Developers are notorious for always wanting to use the next shiny new toy, but you know what? The thing is that if you're a developer, learning how to use the next shiny new toy is a good idea, because if you don't, eventually people stop using the toys that you're familiar with and comfortable with. Same is going to be true for us. While there are many skills that are always going to be needed, it's important for a BA to be continuously stretching himself or herself to be prepared to move on to the next thing, the next kind of project, recognizing that the stuff you've done in the past isn't going to be the stuff that you need to do 10 years from now.
Okay. Well, that was excellent, solid advice. I'm sure everyone is going to be in agreement with me. This was a fantastic podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Amy. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, on behalf of the IIBA and us over here at Business Analyst Times, I'd like to thank you very much, and I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Have a great day.